Welcome to another episode of the Whooping the Doctor podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Curry, alongside my co-host, Dr. John Devereaux.
And today we have another very special guest. I've known this guest for, it has to be like at least 12 years. And she's someone who's a game changer, I like to say, in the educational field because she's very innovative and she's very motivated, and she's a trailblazer in the education field, and we're so lucky to have her on today. We have Miss LaTisha Cole. Welcome to the Wolf and the Doctor podcast. We're glad to have you.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, you are currently an assistant principal. Can you tell us a little bit about your position?
Sure. I'm an assistant principal in the Dallas area. I am a principal at a high school. About 2,000 students go there, and I specifically manage teachers and departments in special education, deaf education, and then the business department at the high school, as well as the physical and health science department. So I have a lot of shoes to fill, but my biggest responsibility is really managing the special education department and the deaf education department. So within that department, I have, of course, students who have special needs. I mean, the spectrum goes from severely disabled, cognitively disabled, to students who are extremely high functioning but just still need extra supports. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side, we have the deaf ed program, which our high school is the only high school in the district that houses deaf ed high school students. So I have deaf education teachers that I have to communicate with interpreters. I have Spanish-speaking parents who have deaf children. So sometimes I'm in a meeting with a translator and an interpreter, and it's a very unique experience, and something that has really changed my life, working with that community.
It sounds like you wear a lot of hats in your everyday role, and then we're even going to talk about some of the entrepreneurial things that you have going on as well. Now, we always start every episode with a quote of the week, so the quote for this week comes from you. I pulled this from one of your podcast episodes, and you said that when you're devoted to change and making a difference for the better, everyone is not going to like you. So I'd like to, before we even start diving into your current role, you also have this alias, I'll call it, which is also the name of your podcast, Diary of a Mad Black Teacher. Now, can you explain the meaning behind that? Because the meaning is a little bit different than what I even anticipated.
Sure. So the meaning behind it, mad, is actually making a difference. Mm-hmm. It's not mad as people think of, angry or upset. It's actually a compilation of literally memoirs of things that have happened to me in my educational career, stories of the people that I have come in contact with, thousands of parents, thousands of students, thousands of teachers who I have seen their stories and their lives kind of play out in front of my eyes through education. And I take that and make a compilation of really this diary, right? This diary that it can be written down. It can be in the form of a podcast where I share those stories. And I use those stories to kind of lead me and help lead other people to making better decisions and being more knowledgeable in the educational system and trying to fight oppression within the educational system for marginalized students and specifically students of color.
Yeah, and what I'm really interested to know is, John and I always talk about when we finally get into our career path, it's really almost never like we anticipated it to be, or the career that we wanted to ultimately go into, right? For you, has education always been a career that you wanted to pursue?
No, it was absolutely not. So when I got to college, I thought that I was going to go into the health field. Definitely thought, sign me up. Let me get those science classes, math classes, because I'm going into the hospital. I'm going to work, with sick people. And I got an opportunity at 19 to go actually work in hospitals in Jamaica. So I did a study abroad program. And when I got there, I had a professor, and I think this is really important, right? In our educational career, we have, I call them angels, or in our education, or in our career field, we have these angels who kind of guide us and lead us and mentor us, even if we don't ask. Most times we don't even ask. They just kind of grab us up and take us under their wing. But he really paid attention to me every day that I was going to the hospital, and he was like, "You're super compassionate. You are really like building relationships with these patients, but you can't turn it off. Like I was like, oh my God, they're sick. I'm after work. I'm like, what can I do to help? Can I take some of these kids home? You know, like it was kind of like crazy, right? And he was like, you know, you're really compassionate. I don't know if this is like mentally healthy for you. Not that I was like losing my mind, but I was just super, I guess, entangled into like trying to like save everyone. And I did not want anyone to die on my watch, which is really unrealistic, right, in the medical field. And so he was like, I think something else might be really good for you. I want to take you somewhere different tomorrow. He wouldn't tell me where he was taking me, but he's like, I just want you to try it out. And I went to the school. That's where he took me to. And I'm like, where are we at? He's like, I want you to try education. I think you'll be good. And I'm like, and my mom like, they don't even make enough money. I'm not doing that. And so I went into the classroom. I mean, and it took less than 30 seconds. I knew I was home. I knew that that's where I needed to be. I knew that's what I wanted to do. And that's kind of where I learned knowing your calling, knowing why God put you on this earth, because you can feel it. Like you know when I call it home.
See, that's interesting. We talked to one of our previous guests, and her whole thing was focused on finding your purpose. And it's amazing how, like, even with the story that you just told, like 30 seconds into the classroom, you knew that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is where I'm supposed to be at.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned on your podcast, I mean, the road to even getting your degrees wasn't that easy as people think, right?
Right, exactly. So as I've stated before, I changed my major to education going into my junior year. Education program is really a 5-year degree. I went to my deans and my counselors and said, hey, this is what I want to do. And they pretty much told me it was impossible to get it done in time for me to graduate within the 4 years. You basically need to start thinking about what loans you're going to take out of state loans, because I went to school out of state. Of course, I couldn't afford to do that. I guess I could have. I could have taken all of these loans. But my parents, completely advised against that, which was smart. And so I had to figure out a way to get it done. And so I literally enrolled myself in another college nearby, and I was taking college courses at 2 different universities at the same time. So I was going to school from about 7 a.m. in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. And through the summer, I had no semesters off. And I finished within 4.5 years. So I had an extra semester after my 4 years to finish up, but I was blessed where they actually granted me in-state tuition. I was able to work at a bank as a teller and pay it off, and I got it done. But I was super driven because I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And it was nothing that was going to stop me. And that's what I was saying about like knowing your purpose and your calling. You know it because you know you're going to get it done, and you know it's nothing going to stop you from doing it because you know that's why you're here.
That's, man, going to one college was tough enough. I couldn't imagine going to two.
Going to two?
But when you think about that, like that shows a high level of drive. And is that something that you've always had, or was that just really tied to your purpose?
I think that I've always had the drive, but I think that this purpose like put it in turbo mode, right? It was like I've had that drive. I've been a pretty disciplined person, student, my entire life. But I think that passion and that purpose put it in turbo mode. Like, I'm going to get this done and no one's going to stop me. And I don't care what you tell me, but I'm going to get it done. So
I do have a follow-up question. I know you wanted to jump in there, Glenn. But I'm curious, with someone who's very driven like yourself, and you're in a leadership position now as an assistant principal, how is it motivating people that work under you, or even like the students? How are you able to, I guess, make your drive and your motivation infectious for those, that are working with you or under you?
Yeah, so this is something that I had to learn as I became into leadership. Right now, as you go into leadership, you're like, wow, like how am I going to lead? What am I going to do to basically empower people or to make people buy into my vision? Even though I'm very driven, I lead in a very laid back way. I'm not that like super like, hey, I need you to get this done right now. I don't feel like people perform well under those circumstances. I take the approach of I need to know who I'm leading. So the first, it doesn't matter whatever position I go into, like, so this new position I went into 2 years ago, the first 3 days, I literally had time slots, 15-minute time slots for all the teachers I manage. And I manage I have about 60 people who report to me. And I had 15-minute slots back to back to back all day. And those 15 minutes was just, what's your favorite candy? When's your birthday? Who's your person that you go to? Who's your support that when you go home? What's their name? Give me their number. I want to know who you are. How many kids do you have? What's their name? What do you love to do? Building those relationships, because you can't lead people if you don't know them, right? Everybody has different ways to communicate. How would you like me to communicate with you? If we have to have a serious conversation, would you rather an email? Would you rather me text you? Would you rather me have you come into my office? Learning all of those things and actually having it somewhere, so I know, like, okay, it's time for me to have a tough conversation. And she said she'd much rather email. Let me do it in email instead of having her come into my office, because you do want people to feel comfortable when you have those coachable moments, when you're having those conversations, whether it's tough, whether it's easy, whether it's light. You want people to be comfortable. And you also want people to understand and know that you care about them. They're not a number. They're not someone who you just want them to produce, but you don't care about everything they have going on personally and everything they have to do to even get to the day or the job to produce for you. So I'm real big on building relationships. I'm real laid back. My people know they can come talk to me about anything. They know that we're going to work through it together. They know if they can't understand something, I'm going to go in, I'm going to teach them, I'm going to coach them, I'm going to get them the support they need, even if I can't do it. And so I guess that's how I approach that. I'm driven and I'm going to get the results, but I'm going to take it in a way of building those relationships and knowing my people and being very strategic about how I coach them, and what I expect from them.
You got a lot going on from, side businesses and your personal life and your career. How do you not spread yourself so thin?
Yeah, so that is something, I think, as a young professional, right? I've had this conversation with many people, and that's one thing that's too, is like having that circle of other young professionals who are doing amazing things, no matter if it's in your field or not, just being able to be able to bounce ideas off of and talk about personal, professional, and those things. And I think that one thing that I've come to the conclusion of is, if you want to be successful, there are going to be seasons where you really do have to spread yourself thin, right? It's no way around it, because if you have these visions and you want to get these things done, it's going to be times and seasons in your life where you are going to be just spread thin. But then you also need to have a comeback of where you have seasons where you can take a break and you can breathe, you can take care of yourself, take care of other things, and it's a balance. I think that some people say, well, never spread yourself thin. For me, that's not realistic. Like, around finals times, around Christmas break, right before we go on, I'm thin, right? I have a lot of responsibilities, lots of things need to happen. I'm going to be thin. So for me to say, well, I'm just going to step back and make sure I'm not thin, and I'm going to just take care of myself, that's unrealistic, because I'm not going to be able to be accountable for the people who are looking up to me and relying on me to get what I need to get done. But after break, when we go on break, I'm unplugging. I'm going to make sure I get that time back for myself. Yeah. And so it's that balance.
Yeah, and I follow you on Instagram, so I see when you do take those breaks, like, you live life, like you be out there traveling and everything. So it is, I think, like you said, having that healthy balance. That was a really good point that you mentioned about, at times you are going to have to spread yourself thin. I think everybody's balancing multiple things within their lives, and sometimes you can't control, you know, how much time you have to devote to maybe family, because maybe something medically is going wrong with your family or with work. So I do see it as a constant attempt to just manage all of these different things, especially for entrepreneurs, where you have other things that you're doing outside of, like, your traditional 9 to 5. So I agree wholeheartedly. But going back really quick to like your leadership style, because I think that was really, it's really interesting how you put that even though you're a very driven person and motivated, you lead in a very relaxed manner. And I remember seeing something that you posted. This was probably a few weeks ago, where you just bought pizza, I think, for like all of your staff, and you have like this candy cart that you're just pushing around, and I'm like, man, I wish I was. I like that type of stuff. Like I'm assuming like you have great working relationships if people don't feel like you said like just a number per se.
Right. Exactly. Like, and that idea literally came because of COVID, right? Everybody's stressed out. Like, and we're so concerned about our kids, right? Like, oh my God, our kids, they're not being able to be with their friends. They have to learn, virtually, or even if they're in the building, they have to wear masks all day. And that is something that is really, really stressful for all of us. All adults are just really focused on the kids. And we really kind of forget about the teachers who are literally in the matter of hours have to learn how to teach in a completely different way. And they're learning new apps. They're learning new ways to communicate with parents, protocol and safety and so much. And they have their own families, like you said, their own families they're dealing with, many of them dealing with sicknesses and illnesses themselves, and we forget about them. And so I'm just like, my teachers are tired. They need some joy. What can I do? People love to eat. And I was just like, I'm getting in the car and I'm rolling around and I'm going to have a stereo on it and I'm going to play some music and I'm just going to feed them. And my principal thought I was crazy. Like, you're not going to roll around this big school. I'm like, yes, I am. And I was like, I told my secretary, clear all of my meetings today. I'm not doing anything but rolling this cart around all day. And I did it the first time. And then they loved it so much, and I was so excited that they loved it that I do it every Friday now. So
Wow.
I have no meetings on Fridays. So I'm just rolling stuff around and but like that little, like you said, that little bit of like attention and just like that, me showing them gratitude and appreciation. And when they come out of their room and we dance a little bit, just, that just makes them feel loved. It makes them feel appreciated. And it really, I think, reduces a lot of their stress and anxiety about just the unknown.
Yeah, and you mentioned something that was really interesting, and John and I talk about all the time, is how COVID forces people to adapt and change the way that they typically, move in their career. For you, how has COVID changed the classroom directly? I know you do the virtual, but has it impacted you on like a totally different level than you thought?
Yeah, and I'm going to go two ways with that. So where I am, we are in school. We do a hybrid. So parents, of course, do have an option to keep their students at home, but parents also have an option to bring their students to school. Now, when we first went into COVID quarantine in March, of course, it was completely virtual. And it did change everything for me because I'm used to being in a building, seeing kids, managing my teachers, seeing, like I said, I'm real big on relationships. So not being able to see them was a huge disappointment. However, I realized that we could connect with kids on another level, kids who were traditionally not good in school. I saw that they were really good at virtual learning. They were really good at logging in. And I told you I work with a lot of special education students who, like I said, feel left out. And I think that being behind a computer, being in their own safe space, they felt more comfortable. They felt more comfortable putting their question in the chat than raising their hand and being humiliated in class. And so I saw a shift in that where we have an opportunity now, another means of educating our students for the ones who are not good in the traditional setting. We now have another way to educate them where they feel comfortable and they can be successful. So that was huge. But going another way, kind of back to that self-care, COVID really forced me to really take care of myself because before that, I was working like 16-hour days. I was completely neglecting my health. I had gained lots of weight. I was sleep deprived, and I felt like I had to produce because I was in a new role, because I was in this leadership position, because this was expected of me, and everyone else around me was doing it as well. And I didn't want to be looked at as I was lacking. But I was tired. I was tired, and I was stressed out, and it was extremely overwhelming. But me like realizing like, wow, I was working 16-hour days, and I'm literally managing and running a building from my living room. Something isn't panning out, right? And it forced me to make boundaries, for myself. And I was like, whenever I do go back to work, I'm not doing that anymore. It's unnecessary. It's taking away time for me to pursue my other ventures that I want to. And my education consulting company and my podcast was birthed through COVID, because I did have that extra time. Because I did have the time to actually sit down and watch what's going on and realize where the needs were in education, to be able to create a plan, to be able to help parents and students and teachers as well. So I think that COVID was a blessing in many ways for me. I understand that it hasn't been for many people. And of course, my thoughts and prayers are always with them. But for me, and I think a lot of people, it did make us realize that we do need to set boundaries. And the time that we're giving to these companies, these corporations, who we are a number to, we can be taking back some of that time and really pursuing what we want to do and pursuing our dreams. Because you die, they're replacing you in a matter of hours, and you spend all your life trying to produce and killing yourself for them. So it's like, set those boundaries, have time for yourself, whether it's pursue another business venture or just to have more time for yourself or your family. But I think that COVID really helped me know that I need to set those boundaries.
Yeah, that's actually tied into Glenn. I think you just posted this on Instagram like last week about if you're working a 9 to 5, if somehow pass away, they will just replace you by the end of the day.
Yes.
And that is really true. And I think that was a call to action for people to start focusing on some of the things that they are passionate about. So speaking of that, talk about some of those side ventures that you do have going on. You mentioned your podcast, and I know you also do some education consulting. So tell us a little bit about those things.
Yeah, so through COVID, I'm sitting in my living room with, some downtime. I think we all had a lot of downtime, and really look at the systems of oppression. And typically we talk about, the oppression within the police and justice system, a lot of healthcare, system oppression and just malpractice and treatment of Black people get highlighted. But one thing that I was just like, people really don't understand is that the very thing that every single one of us go through, every single one of us in this country go through, the education system is extremely oppressive. Everybody might not go through the justice system, and everybody might not necessarily have to be hospitalized, but everyone is going to go through the education system. There's so much oppression just ingrained in it. And I just needed to expose it, and I needed parents to understand what they were sending their kids into. I needed teachers who are educating these students to understand their biasness, to understand how they play into this oppression. If you're just blindly going into a classroom and thinking, well, I'm just going to educate this kid, and every kid, no matter if they're white, Black, Hispanic, can be educated the same, you're sadly mistaken, because their experiences in life are not going to be the same, which means their education has to be different. Doesn't mean you treat them differently, but it means that you educate yourself with everything that they're going to have to go through so that you can properly prepare them for success. And I was just like, how can I mass speak to people, right? Like, I'm only in 1 building. Like, how can I actually speak to so many parents on a larger scale? And I'm like, podcast. And through my podcast, I wanted to speak to parents. But through my podcast, I also wanted to pull in parents and teachers who needed that guidance, who needed that help, who found themselves in tough situations in the education system where they just don't know the lingo. They don't know how to speak to the principal. They feel like they're being ignored. They feel like their students are being wrong. But a lot of parents are intimidated because teachers stick together, educators stick together, just like cops stick together, just like any job you go to, right? The people are going to stick together and protect each other. And so you find these parents who just feel like, I know my child isn't being treated right, but I don't know how to prove it, or I don't know like how to go about it. And who's not the perfect person besides me, who has so much experience in education, to be that advocate for them, to help them through those processes. And so that's what my education consulting company is literally designed to do, is literally to give parents of marginalized students or parents of color affordable advocacy. Nothing more than that. It's completely advocacy to help them be able to get that equitable, fair, excellent education for their students. And also to help teachers, white, Black, red, purple, green, be able to get coaching and help and guidance from me on how to best educate their students in their classroom, because unfortunately there are not a lot of leaders in education who have that mindset and can coach teachers to be better teachers for our kids.
How many of the kids that you teach, how how many of them do you see yourself in, right? Like you say, that guy, I mean, that girl kind of reminds me of me when I was younger.
I think that I see myself in all my kids in different ways. And I know that might sound weird, but you have the kid who's super quiet. And some days in school, I was quiet because I didn't want to be bothered. And sometimes I see my kid, myself in the kid who's talkative or who is walking down the hallway and they're super happy because they got their new shoes on, right? And I remember that day after Christmas or the day after, Christmas break when I get to go to school and have my new shoes on and I want to show my friends, And I just find joy in the innocence of children. And so that just always gives me joy because you have the opportunity to mold them.
Now, you've mentioned a couple times already the importance of mentorship. And I know that's
Mhm.
something that Glenn and I also take very seriously and, really advocate for. How important was it for you finding mentorship? And then also, I'm assuming you reciprocate mentorship as well to other, professionals coming up. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I remember the first time I was introduced to mentorship was my mom. She actually signed me up for this program at our church, and I had a mentor. And that kind of lasted for like a year or two, the whole program, and it kind of just went away. But I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it. I think I was maybe like in seventh or eighth grade. And I just kind of never got back into mentorship until really my right after college. And like I said, that mentor, she did not, I didn't ask for her. She was like, I'm taking you and I want to make sure that you're good. And I just, from there, after that, I actually did start to seek mentorship. And every time I moved up, I wanted to have that person that I connected with. And I typically have relationships with all of them still. But I can never say that probably within the last 4 years that I just was like, everyone needs to have a mentor. Like before it was kind of like, oh, it's something that I like to do. But I really didn't feel like everyone needed to have it or even kind of think of it on that big scale. But now I think it is so crucial. And I think mentorships looks different for everybody, right? A mentor, you can have a friend who's a mentor, right? You can have a friend who's in a business that you aspire to be in, and it's more like of a friendship, but you guys talk business. And that is typically that is considered mentorship. Or you can actually have someone who's vetted in the industry or whatever path you're trying to go into, and that can be mentorship. But whatever you're trying to do, you need to have somebody who's knowledgeable in it, who can guide you and direct you, because we don't have time for trial and error, right? There's too many people out here who know the game, who can help you get through all of those mistakes that you would have made and will cost you a lot of money and time, and just kind of avoid it by just having someone who you can talk to and ask those questions is super important. And so going back to Glenn's question about mentorship, that is something that I actually require. So for my students who are high risk, especially my boys, they have to have a mentor within the building. But it's super important because a lot of our kids don't have that. Even if they have, and people think, well, if they're single parents, they come from single parents, they just don't have, no, there's kids who have two parents who just don't have a person to talk to. And I know that might sound like, how does that happen? But mom and dad's working, they don't really have that time for guidance, So if you're at risk, no matter what your familiar structure is, you do have a mentor, because it's really important to keep those kids on track, them to be able to voice, like you said, voice what they want, and that mentor to be able to connect them to those resources to try to make sure that they stay interested in school. They are able to explore their interests, maybe possible career paths and other extracurricular activities. And it's just an awesome thing. It's really a wonderful thing. And I think that everybody should have a mentor.
For someone who's looking to pursue a similar path as yourself, what would be some advice that you would give them?
I think this kind of goes back to the quote, right? That, and I'm going to shorten it up, but basically, if you're doing something where you're not, I'm not going to say a lot of people, you're going to meet people who don't like what you're doing. And that can come in many different forms. But I would say that no matter where you're going, whether it's a similar path for me in education, and I will get to my little, I guess, promo of we need more Black people in education in a minute. But if you're looking for whatever path you're going into, number one, make sure that you're passionate about it. Make sure that that is what you have been called to do. Everyone has been called to do something on this earth, and most times, most people have many different callings, right? You have different talents, and you have different ways that you can help this world be better. But first and foremost, make sure that it's what you're passionate about, not what someone else is passionate about for you, and or what you're trying to do because of someone else's advice. And I am so thankful that at 19, I was able to receive what my professor was showing me, which was pretty much, you want to go into health or you want to be a nurse, but that's really because that's what you saw. That's what you saw other people do. You thought it was going to make you a lot of money. I don't necessarily know if you're going to be happy long term with that. And so as an adult, we need to just, first of all, make sure that we are doing what we're passionate about and doing what makes us happy. The money will come, if that's what you want to do, because you'll make sure that it comes if that's what you need. But make sure you're passionate. And then also make sure you surround yourself around people who have similar mindsets. Doesn't have to be in the same career field, because again, if you're going into that career field, you're going to meet people who can mentor you. You're going to meet people who can help you. But you need to make sure that you have people around you with similar mindsets. I've met so many young women specifically who are trying to get into education or trying to have a successful career path, but they're still dating people who don't want to do anything, or they still have friends who just want to chill out all day. And so those things aren't stimulating, right? They contradict. And it's not saying that you have to cut those people off or you can't be friends with them, but that shouldn't be who you're spending majority of your time with. You should be spending majority of your time with people who are driven, who are trying to be successful in whatever path they're going, because that's going to give you, like I said, put you in that turbo mode. It's going to give you more energy. It's going to give you more focus to pursue whatever it is that you're trying to pursue. And then I think that the next thing and the final thing is have a vision for what it is that you want to do. I think a lot of times you're like, okay, well, I want to be a teacher. Okay, great. Why do you want to be a teacher? What do you want to fulfill when you're in that role? When you leave that classroom, or when you retire, if you retire from being a teacher or whatever, whatever, before you go into the next step or phase of your career, what do you want them to say, or what do you want to be able to say, I've done? Backwards plan, pretty much, right? Plan from what you want the end result to be. And so if you know what that end result is, you're going to drive yourself to get there. But if you're just kind of navigating blindly, like through, you can be pulled in a lot of different directions. And that kind of goes back to that circle, right? You can be pulled this way, maybe thrown off track. But if you know what your end result is, if you backwards plan and you know this is my goal in this role, you can drive yourself to get there. You can create systems and plans for yourself to get there quicker.
And that's exactly what we were talking about on our New Year's episode, having those systems in place, because when you ultimately have that vision for what you're trying to do with your life, now you can take those requisite steps each day, each month, each year to make sure that you achieve that goal that you're trying to get to. Now, speaking of like your career path, you transitioned from teaching to administration, or those leadership roles, and you're still very young. So for the people who are listening, they probably can't tell, but you are very young. So how has it been being in the leadership role as a young professional?
Yeah, so it's so crazy that you said that, because today I have these thoughts. You have some downtime and you're in your day and you're doing what you're doing, and I had a teacher text me and say, hey, Ms. Cole, I need to go to the doctor. I was able to actually get an appointment, and I didn't think I would be able to get into the spring. Do you mind if I leave early? And I text back, sure. Like, take care of yourself. Which is normal for me, right? I'm never going to tell somebody I can't go to the doctor or whatever. I need my my teachers to be well, because they can't pour from empty cup. But it was like kind of surreal, like, wow, this woman is like triple my age and she's asking me for permission to leave work. Like wow, you really are a leader, right? And it was like sometimes you have those like reminders, like, okay, like you're in a respected position, right? And people do lean on you to lead them and coach them. But then there's policies and procedures, right? Where of course you need to ask for your leave and stuff like that. But it's kind of weird sometimes because I'm like, wow, like it's like my grandma asking me, like, can she leave? Like, sometimes it's like the reverse. But one thing I'm blessed about, my afterthought was that she respects me still enough to do it. Because I've built that relationship with her where she knows it is not a power struggle. It is, I'm always going to respect her, but she still respects me enough to do it. And I hear so many stories about young people in leadership where they have these battles with veterans, with older people who are like, I'm not listening to you. You're too young. You're younger than my kids. I'm not going to listen to you. I've been so blessed. I've never had that. I've been in education and leadership in 2 different states now, and 2 different high schools, big high schools. And I have managed hundreds of people. And I just thank God that He's, like I said, given me the discernment to know that you have to build those relationships. If you want to be in leadership, you want to be successful in leadership, if you want to be in leadership long term, you have to build those relationships, and you have to be relational, and you have to be personable to people. You have to be approachable, and you can never get too big-headed or too full of yourself, because they will pull you right down. They will pull you down. I've seen it, and I just don't ever want to be there. So I'm thankful.
How important has networking been for you in your career path in helping you kind of get and solidify the position that you're at now?
So crazy, networking hasn't been as influential in getting me where I'm at as a position, but it's been influential in preparing me for my position, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the people that I have worked with years ago, I still will text them. Like I said, I will still go out to lunch with them. I will still shoot ideas, bounce things off of them. And like that knowledge that I'm just always like soaking in, then I can take that with me and go into an interview, right? I literally knew no one. I moved to another state, another city. I knew no one here. But I was able to take everything that I learned, how to interview, what to say, how to sell myself, really, how to put a portfolio together from these people that I've networked with and people that I have met in my career, and bring that into the table and get a job. And get a job, not only just, but get a career in a job that was fit for me. And that's also very important for people who are going into different career paths or even trying to move up. I know sometimes we get super excited, like I want that promotion, I want more money, like whoever offers me the next highest paying job, I'm gonna go. But you gotta make sure it's a good fit for you. Because if it's not, you're not gonna be happy, and it's not going to be long term. It's just not gonna work. So I always tell younger people who are coming up and, trying to make their mark in whatever career path is, please, just as they're interviewing you, you should be interviewing them to make sure that that's going to be where you're going to be taken care of. You're going to grow. You're going to be respected, and it's going to be a good fit for you as well. Because at the end of the day, they need you to produce for them, but you also need them to give you a climate and a culture to be able to produce in.
Yeah, and I was reading this quote earlier this week that said that you're more likely to succumb to a toxic environment than to change it. So that's why It's really important for you to make sure that situation that you are going into is going to be conducive for you to grow and be an asset for the company at the same time. Now, for you have a very demanding professional job. So how do you find time to focus on your own individual businesses?
Yeah, so that's what I was saying, like with COVID happening and me just realizing, like, why am I spending 16 hours a day? Like, I literally get my work done in 4 hours. This is ridiculous. Like, what am I doing here? And, I had to have a tough conversation with my boss. I toyed with it for a while, a couple of months, and I'm like, this conversation has to happen, because when we get out of this whole working from home situation, like I will not have the expectation on me that I'm working 16 hours a day anymore. Like I'm just not going to do it. And I literally came to the realization, like, I might have to go to another school, or I might have to work for someone else if that truly is a hard set expectation, because I can't. Number one, health-wise, I can't. Like, it's just unhealthy. But then two, I have other things that I want to pursue in my life, and as a human being, you have the right to be able to pursue other things. You don't have to only work for whatever company you're working for. And I feel like any good leader respects that and wants whoever, they're leading to pursue and be happy and do whatever is their heart desires. But of course, we understand that everybody isn't like this. So I just went and had a hard conversation. And one thing that I always say is, when you're having hard conversations, is definitely voice your concern, but also have a solution, right? You don't want to go in there complaining or talking about all these problems without, well, how can you fix it? So what I did was I basically just said, I am completely dedicated to this team. I feel like I spent a lot of hours last year that were really unnecessary, and I could have been doing things more to take care of myself, my family, and pursue other goals that we have also discussed. And I think that any young person who's going into a role, please make sure you communicate your future goals with your boss, because they need to be aware of what it is that you want to do past them. Like, and don't be intimidated. Like, well, I don't want them to know that I'm going to leave. Like, no, a lot of interview questions are, what are you going to be doing in the next 5 years? That doesn't necessarily mean being at that company, but it should give your boss a idea of how to grow you and what opportunities to give to you so you can get there. But anyway, so I knew that I had already communicated with him that my goals were to have an educational consulting company, to be an advocate for students of color and parents of color. So he already knew that. And so I just let him know, there's other goals that I want to pursue, and the 16-hour workday is not going to work for me. Here are some things that we can take out of my day, and here's why. And he was just like, I agree. I was like, I'm performing, I'm high performing, I'm not missing anything. It's nothing that it's not going to get done. If that does become the case, of course, I'm willing to pick up more hours, but right now, I'm not doing a 16-hour day. And here's what I'm going to do, and here's why, and you're still going to get the product that you were getting before. And he had nothing to say. I mean, he couldn't, because what can you say? I'm still going to give you what you need, but I'm just going to do it less time. And that cleared up time for me to be able to, like I said, do my other ventures, educational consulting, podcasts. I'm starting to write a book for parents and teachers right now. Later, I plan on writing like a children's series for just helping children of color really know their true history. I was reading an article during COVID or quarantine last year, and it was just saying this amount of time that you dedicate to your job, most of that time you could be taking to pursue something else, so you don't always have to work for someone else.
Mm-hmm. For some of the things that you learn in your professional work, how many of those things have you taken and kind of used in your side business and helping build and mold that to grow?
I would say everything. I mean, everything that I've seen happen in education is the motivation for the podcast, for the consulting company. It's directly tied with, this isn't like, I'm not, I didn't create this because I'm like, well, statistically, I read that parents need an advocate. Like, no, this is like, I live this every day. This is real. Like, they need someone to help them. Like, this is not going to change until policies change, which is, of course, a future goal of mine as well. But right now, parents need help. Teachers need help. Like, of course, the system is not going to just turn over and be equal and wonderful and excellent right now. But what we can do is plant enough seeds in people to start paying attention to it, to know what to look for, to at least change what's going on in their child's life, in their child's education experience, while we work on changing those policies. Because one thing is, as I tell people, and this is about any system of oppression, people are like, oh, we need to, the system isn't working. They need to. No, the system is actually working perfectly. The system is working exactly how it was designed to work, which is to oppress marginalized people and people of color. Like, that is what it was designed to do, and it's working perfectly. And so once we understand that it is working perfectly, now we can understand how to change that. And so that is the whole goal of my educational career, and just seeing what I've seen, experienced what I've experienced, is directly tied to what I'm doing and what I'm building with Diary from an Black Teacher as a brand, but more importantly, as a means to help so many people.
And I think that's so needed. Just listening even to the first episode, the very first episode, you come out with those stories from your experience,
Man.
that it's like, this actually is happening. People are actually talking about these students this way. People are really attempting to defund certain programs that are in place to help students from, these non-traditional or marginalized backgrounds to succeed. And I guess that was like a wake-up call for me, because I've been so far removed from like the K through 12 system. But now that my son is getting ready to go into that system, now you really start paying some attention to it. Like, okay, I don't want him going into, and my son especially has like special needs, so he's already at a disadvantage. So understanding that, it's important for parents like myself, who was, just getting thrown into this, to know how to advocate on behalf of my kid. And it really is uncharted territory for a lot of individuals. And I'm just happy that, somebody is out there doing, the legwork to educate, parents and teachers as well.
I just pray that more people pay attention to it, because when we send our kids into a building and they spend more time with educators and in the school than with us, we have to understand that impacts their future very much. And I also don't think that parents understand how influential sometimes school and the people that you are entrusting your kids with every single day can be on them. I've heard stories of so many people who maybe went into school loving math. They have a bad math teacher, they hate it, right? So just after 1 year. So imagine your child dealing with this every single year for years. Imagine the impacts on them and how that can literally derail them. Or you have good, great teachers, can maybe make them more successful than they probably were going to be.
It seems like you're working on from the outside through your consulting business to try to educate parents, but then you're also working on the inside of the actual building, so you're within the belly of the beast, working as well. Which one do you think has the greater impact? The outside working in, or the inside working out?
So I think I couldn't do either or without the other.
Okay.
I know that's probably weird language, right? So it's like, I want parents to trust me. And so when they find out, like, oh, you're currently in this work, like, I'm not like someone who's far removed or someone who's, like I said, running off theory and statistics. Like, I'm doing this work every single day. I'm able to, I have parents who literally just need me to send an email. They just don't know how to write an email to the principal. Like, they don't know how to use the right lingo. They don't know the laws. They don't know. Sure, I can do that for you. So me being in the system, and also with me being inside of the school, I'm still getting that ongoing training of the up-to-date, like I said, laws, policies, learning systems, learning management systems. So I'm able to literally just dump all of that onto parents, right? Everything I learned, I can literally give you, and you're up to date. It's like live feedback. Whereas I know some other educational consultants, they're retired and they have lots of knowledge, but they're not current and up to date. Like, things are changing in education every single day. And so they might not be familiar with Google Classroom. They might not be able to walk a parent through, like, well, now we're virtual learning. how do I get my kid onto this learning management system? No problem. I know how to do it. My teachers are doing it, right? So I have that advantage of being, like I said, current and up to date to give parents exactly what they need and what's going on in education right now. Being connected to my community and being a part of my community and seeing that we really do need education to be equitable for all. Not because you're talented in this and you can perform, or not because your parents are helicopter parents and are on the teachers and making them do what they need to do. It needs to be equitable for that kid who doesn't have support system, that kid who does have support system, that kid who is athletically talented, kid who's not. It has to be equitable and equal for all, and that's what I'm fighting for on the outside, I guess.
What are some of the ways that the viewers or listeners can support the missions that you have going on with your business ventures?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest thing right now is if they could follow me on Instagram, which is diaryofamablackteacher.com, because I do post I post quotes, I post very relevant information for them just to kind of read and digest, in small dosages, just kind of maybe to get them to think, in a different way just for the week. I also have a platform on them for them to ask questions if they want to hear me talk about something specifically on a podcast. I really do want to give listeners what they need, and so they have a chance and a voice to tell me exactly what they want to hear, and I can definitely prepare something to help them learn in whatever capacity they're trying to get more information in for their child, whether it's their parent or a teacher. And then the other thing is that my website is also on my Instagram and Linktree, so they can always go onto my website. They can book me for a consultation. Consultations are free, so I would love for them to understand that it's free for you to talk to me and tell me what you need, and I can make a plan individually on what they need. And then also they can email me or call me. I have a business phone, and the information is all on my website as well. So I definitely want them to communicate with me. I definitely want them to call, email, like I said, set up consultations, whatever they need, even if it's just a question, like that's fine. We can set it up, we can talk about it. I don't want them to have any questions that's unanswered, because the more knowledgeable they are, the more prepared they can be to help their children be successful or their students be successful. And that's ultimately what I want. And of course, just word of mouth. Tell their friends, hey, if you want some extra guidance and how to best, get your child the best education possible, go follow Ms. Cole, diaryofamablackteacher.com, or of course on my Instagram is probably the easiest way to follow me and just kind of get those live updates.
And that's another episode of the Wolf and the Doctor podcast. Again, I'm your host, Glenn Curry, alongside my co-host, Dr. John Devereaux. Whatever you guys are listening on, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below.
And once again, we just want to thank Miss LaTisha Cole for, spending her time with us and, dropping this knowledge and, just also being a resource for the listeners and viewers as well. So we just want to thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. I had a ball. It was so fun talking to you guys. Thank you.
And this has been another episode of The Wolf and the Doctor.